There are events in our lives that have an instant impact. Those of us old enough to remember September the 11th, 2001, probably remember where they were and how they learned of the attacks of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. The impact of 9/11 inspired country music Hall of Famer Alan Jackson to write the song, Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning? For many across Southern Appalachia, late September 2004 has a similar feel. Many found their homes, vehicles, possessions, and even family members had been lost in the hard-hitting, heavy flooding Hurricane Helene. On this episode of Your Impact Story, we're going back to the front lines of Hurricane Helene damage in western North Carolina. When this episode airs, a few months have passed since the storm, and it is amazing to see the impact so many people have had. As people from across the country join together to support those who lost everything. There's more work to be done. This is your impact story. Hurricane Helene was a Category 4 hurricane, made landfall in Florida September the 26th, made its way up the coast through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and even across East Tennessee. The storm brought record rainfall, flooding, and storm surges causing extensive outages, mudslides, and in some areas destroying entire towns. The storm was the deadliest to strike since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Economic losses estimated over $50 billion. My family was fortunate. The storm stayed mostly west of us, and our only damage was a leak in our roof and some downed trees around our farm. But across western North Carolina, Georgia, and East Tennessee, many lives were forever changed. Over that weekend, I messaged and emailed several friends and contacts across western North Carolina. Several colleagues and friends were without power, water, and a few had significant damage to their homes. Those who could respond were really in a state of shock, unsure of the damage, unsure of the needs. The extent would take days to process and fully grasp. The more contacts I made, the more I saw on social media, the more I felt need to take action. On Sunday, I heard back from Boone Chamber President David Jackson, who gave me direction of what he'd heard at that point. I also heard back from friend and App State's football coach, Mark Spear, who told me that App had some student athletes without water. A few messages to friends, and we had a quick plan together that we'd round up all the water we could and head to Boone first thing Monday morning. The next morning, we had to make a few stops just to find water. We finally found pallets of water at a food line about 20 miles from home, bought all that they would sell us, and we were App State bound. Going to Boone, we really didn't see much destruction from the storm. In town, began to see low areas that were in bad shape, some completely washed out. When we arrived at Kid Brewer Stadium, Coach Spear met us and led us into the football locker room, where we stacked 2 truckloads of water into the players' lounge. While we were there, we visited with a few coaches, and we met team chaplain Reggie Hunt. While talking to Reggie and the coaches, we learned that Reggie's church, Cornerstone, was setting up a drop location for food, water, and supplies. We decided to head from App to Cornerstone to take supplies and see how we could help. When we arrived at Cornerstone, we unloaded our remaining supplies and saw a well-organized distribution center in action. After unloading our trucks, we helped a few others unload their vehicles as well. We finished unloading a vehicle when a lady pulled in asking for water and help. She was crying. She told us that she was from outside of Alice and drove her car through the woods to get back to the roads, to get down to Boone, because the roads were all blocked by storm damage. Her father was sick and in need of emergency medical attention. We loaded her car with supplies and prayed with her. Our team was gathering to follow her back to help her father, but we confirmed the fire department had reached him just before we left out. While in Boone, we were introduced and dropped off baby supplies at the Children's Council of Watauga. Another amazing operation. They shared what they needed, and we ensured them that we'd be back. We grabbed lunch at a local restaurant that was one of the few places open. While at lunch, we got a call from a contractor in West Jefferson that a big part of the town of Lansing had been washed out by the storm, and they were looking for water to try to get the victims in that area. We still had a few cases of water in the truck that day and decided to head north out of Boone to Ashe County to take the few supplies that we had with us. I'll never forget pulling up, and this big guy came out who was in the fire department in Lansing. When we gave him the water, he started crying, talking about the damage there. He was so grateful for the few cases of water that we had brought. Seeing the need firsthand reminded all of us that the work to be done was still unclear but extensive. We knew that our work there wasn't done. Several guys in our group made several trips during the week following the storm, doing everything from cutting trees and debris removal, taking supplies to families, and more. A few days later, we returned with a bigger group and met at Alliance Bible Fellowship, where Samaritan's Purse, Disaster Relief, assembled employees and volunteers. Thanks to our friend Mark Spear, whose wife Paige works at Samaritan's Purse, we were introduced directly to Edward Graham and several leaders in their incredible organization. I'd volunteered with Operation Christmas Child a few times over the past few years, but instantly gained a new appreciation for the ministry that is Samaritan's Purse Disaster Relief. After training, we went in an effort to find the needs and support any rescue efforts with the supplies we had with us. We were told part of Avery County had not been reached with supplies, and at the time it was unknown exactly what was needed there. We went over to Avery with no instruction or direction. We had several trucks loaded with supplies, side-by-sides, chainsaws, fuel, food, water. We just wanted to get in as far as possible. Most of the map showed the roads closed in all directions once we were outside of Boone. We met at Avery High School with no plan. A sheriff came by and stopped to see what we were doing. He gave us insight that FEMA was set up at the fairgrounds and that there were several ongoing rescue efforts close to the Tennessee line. We were unsure at that point exactly where to go or what we could do to support. Finding Ground Zero was actually harder than you'd think. Honestly, it was like God continued to lead us where we needed to be, one contact at a time. We parked in what looked like an abandoned store that had significant damage and unloaded our side-by-sides and equipment. We turned down a random road, only because it looked like it went down the mountain. Really no other reason. Within a half a mile, the shoulder had been washed out by the creek. Power lines were in the creek. Further down the road, one lane of the road was completely washed away, and an excavator was blocking what was left of the road, trying to work to prevent additional erosion. He led us through. About a mile or so further, we stopped by a construction crew working where the road used to be, and the bridge was out. We pulled up beside a few other side-by-sides that was the U.S. Forestry Service. After a lot of discussion, they told us we could follow them in once the construction crew gave them the green light to cross. We made our way through, met an unmarked SUV. He asked us where we were headed. We told him we were there just looking to help, to bring supplies where needed. He told us there was a rescue mission underway at the end of the road, We couldn't miss it because there was probably 15 emergency vehicles where the road ended. As we pulled down to the end of the road, the bridge had been completely washed out. We were met by a fire chief we learned was over the operation we had arrived at. Went through the same line of questions others up the road had given us. I had a feeling that we were getting ready to get turned away. As I was talking with him, a man walked up with a backpack and asked if we said that we had shovels with us. I told him we did. He looked at the chief and said, "They're with me." He jumped on my Ranger and led us down where the other trucks were as a helicopter flew overhead and landed where we were going. He introduced himself and told me that he was an Army Ranger and had come up on his own to help with the search and rescue efforts. They had just come back from hiking the river and found what appeared to be the floor of a house washed up on a bank. They were trying to get search and rescue team and their dogs down the river, and needed possibly shovels to help dig if the dogs marked anything. When the helicopter landed, out jumped my friend Marcus Drone and the team he leads of Winston-Salem Fire's Swift Water Rescue. Just the night before, I had sent Marcus's wife a message, knowing that he had deployed out for search and rescue missions across western North Carolina, asking her where he was. She told me he was a few counties to the west outside of Asheville. It was pretty awesome to see Marcus jump out of that helicopter and get to pat him on the shoulder and just visit with him for a few minutes. We loaded up the teams and worked our way to the river's edge. There were I-beams across the river in a makeshift bridge. They asked if I thought we could get across it. I told them I'd try as long as they'd get me out of the river if I went in. I figured I was in good hands. We managed to get across the river and drove a short distance back on what was left of the road on the other side of the river. We ventured up an old logging road and then a power line easement. We got to an area up the mountain, and they stopped us and said, "Okay, we need to use saws and cut a path down to the river." We worked our way down, and about 50 or 75 feet from the water's edge was an entire floor of a house. It was an eerie sight and feeling. We stood by with shovels and axes in hand as the team worked the pile for probably close to an hour. A helicopter flew over and dropped others on a small island to search as well. We participated in the search all afternoon with no luck. We learned while we were searching that we were looking for Carrie's school teacher who had gone to Elk Park with her husband to check on their home. While there, the floodwaters broke the house from its foundation and sent it down the river. Her husband managed to escape, but his wife ended up in the cold floodwaters, and at the time this is recorded, is still missing. So tragic for their family. As we took the cruise back across the river, we met a man carrying grocery bags across the I-beam bridge. We were probably 3 miles from the main road and even further from an open store. I really don't know how far he had gone with what he was carrying. I pulled up and offered to give him a hand. He pointed behind me at a truck parked over to the side beyond where we had just been. He told me that was the end of his driveway. We visited for a few minutes, and after he got everything in the truck, he told me that there were people on the backside of the mountain from his place who had been walking over the mountain to him because he was the closest, and that all the roads and access points were still blocked from the storm damage, and those people still hadn't been reached. So hard to imagine. We headed out as soon as we dropped off the rescue teams at their vehicles because another group was coming in to help. We drove back to where we had parked. An older gentleman was in the same parking lot. We offered him a drink, and he teared up. We learned the shop behind us was his and had been badly damaged by the storm, with most of the inside well over ankle deep in river mud that had settled inside. What we thought we were driving back to end our day, our team gave him what drinks we had remaining and began to shovel what we could in the front of his shop. We gave it all we could for about an hour to get most of the mud out of the front room to where it no longer had standing water and mud. I lost count at 25 wheelbarrow loads of mud. We prayed with him and went on our way. It was hard to leave, but thankful that we had crossed paths at the time we did so we could help him all we could at that time. Over the next 2 weeks, myself and our teams had the opportunity to collaborate with Samaritan's Purse, Avery County Emergency Services, and volunteers on several cleanup jobs. Our friends at Caterpillar donated the use of 3 autonomous machines to use during the relief efforts. Contractors, demo operators, and many others donated their time to support these relief efforts. Many continue today. The cleanup work continues. The needs are still there and will be for a long time to come. Soon after this episode airs, we will return to Western North Carolina and visit some of the places months after the storm. We will be interviewing those who were affected and those who took the tools and resources they had and overnight became instant heroes in my book and created forever impact. To everyone that has supported those in Western North Carolina, thank you. Your efforts are not unnoticed. They're not unappreciated. We're so grateful. If you'd like to support the continued relief efforts, reach out to us on social media and we will try to align your support with the right resources and contacts. I'm Dustin Rogers. This is your Impact Story. Thank you.